Our bottom line, as many of you know, is that the influence of the Israel lobby has led to policies that are not in the U.S. national interest, not in the interest of other countries in the region, and ultimately not in Israel's long-term interest as well. The Israel lobby is quite powerful, and this is no secret. Aipac was ranked #2 in the National Journal's survey of lobbies in March 2005, tied with the AARP, by the way, and it was also ranked second in the 1997 survey by Forbes magazine. Bill Clinton said Aipac was, quote, better than anyone else lobbying in this town. Newt Gingrich said it was, quote, the most effective general interest group across the entire planet. Former Senator Fritz Hollings said, as he was leaving office, you can't have an Israel policy other than what Aipac gives you around here. And it's no surprise, therefore, that Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert recently said, thank God we have Aipac, the greatest supporter and friend we have in the whole world. Now, these comments raise an interesting question. Why was our article so controversial if we were just saying what everybody already knows? Now, finally, we argued that the lobby had a powerful and negative effect on U.S. Middle East policy. And you just have to imagine what the world and what U.S. policy might be like if the lobby were less influential. If the lobby were less powerful, the United States would have used its leverage over the last 30 years to discourage the settlements policy or prevent it completely. The reason why the United States went to war in Iraq. Indeed, the lobby could not get either Clinton or Bush to go to war by themselves, even though the neoconservatives were pushing for it from the late 1990s onward. So we don't argue that they were singularly responsible. The key additional factor was September 11th, which turned Cheney and Bush in favor of war. So without 9/11, you don't get a war in Iraq either. But remember, neoconservatives like Paul Wolfowitz in the Pentagon were quick to link Saddam Hussein to September 11th, even though there was no connection. And key groups in the lobby pushed very hard to make the case for war. So we argue that the Israel lobby was a necessary, though not sufficient, condition for the Iraq war. Without the lobby, the war would have been much less likely. And finally, if the lobby were weaker, U.S. policy towards Iran would have been more flexible and possibly more effective. For the past decade or more, a number of prominent American experts have called for a more flexible policy towards Iran, but they get nowhere because Aipac has pushed for a hardline approach. Iran has made several overtures to us over the past decade, getting no response. They actually helped us after September 11th, and we rewarded them by putting them in the axis of evil and calling for real. They sent us a back-channel message in 2003, which included a somewhat veiled offer to end support for Hezbollah, possibly recognize Israel. We rejected because key groups in the lobby were adamantly opposed to any opening. What result? The Iranian hardliners get stronger, Ahmadinejad gets elected, Iran's nuclear ambitions get reinforced. Again, the point I want to underscore here is that in all of these cases, our policy has been bad for the United States and bad behavior finally pointed out the elephant in the room. So what happened? Well, there were the predictable accusations that we were anti-Semites and various attempts to smear us by associating us with people like David Duke. People who offered these charges gave no evidence to back them up, of course, for the simple reason that there isn't any evidence. There was lots of attention on various extraneous issues, such as whether the Kennedy School where I work had asked me to step down from my position as academic dean. For the record, it didn't. When people did discuss the substance, they tended to misrepresent our arguments or erroneously accused us of various factual errors. Now,
the American Jewish community has been demonstrating wall-to-wall support for Israel as it fights on two fronts. Pro-Israel organizations raised money for the Jewish state, took out advertisements in newspapers, closely monitored the media, and met with legislators and staff on Capitol Hill, policymakers in the Bush administration, and influential media figures. They left no stone unturned. Two reasons. First, it is clear that American citizens are more favorably disposed toward Israel than our citizens in other democracies. But this is hardly surprising, since the lobby is so successful at controlling the discourse about Israel in the United States. If there was an open and freewheeling debate about the Jewish state, public opinion here would almost certainly be more in line with European and Asian public opinion on Israel. Second, despite the one-sided discourse about Israel in the United States, public opinion is still surprisingly clear-eyed when it comes to dealing with Israel. In fact, Americans have a much more critical view of Israeli policy than government officials do, and they are certainly much more hard-nosed in how they think about dealing with Israel. Thus, it is hard to argue that the policies of the Bush administration and the behavior of Congress reflect public attitudes about Israel. In other words, is a loyal ally doing the Bush administration dirty work? There are two reasons to doubt this claim. First, if this claim is true, Israel's bombing offensive would have been confined to southern Lebanon, and great care would have been taken to protect and strengthen the Lebanese government. After all, President Bush made it clear at the start of the crisis that he did not want to endanger the government in Beirut, which he had worked so hard to install. More generally, the United States almost certainly would not have sought to set Lebanon back 20 years, as called for by Israel's chief of staff. Second, there's actually little evidence that the Bush administration planned the offensive and then pushed Israel to execute it. In fact, the available evidence suggests that Israel had planned the Lebanon campaign in the months before the events of July 12th, which it used as a pretext for launching it. Israel undoubtedly briefed the United States about the plan and got Bush's endorsement. But giving Israel the green light is not the same as using Israel as a client state.
And I believe that although very powerful countries like the United States can do things that are foolish for quite some time without paying an enormous price, because we're big and powerful, ultimately the costs of those policies do get recognized. We're seeing the costs of one of our follies every day in Iraq now. Costly for us, costly for the Iraqi people, dangerous for all countries in the region. So eventually reality does start to impose itself on our consciousness. I think what all Americans of different faiths and different political backgrounds can do is demand a little bit more of your elected representatives, ask them harder questions, inform yourselves about different things that are happening in the world. Don't take one side as gospel immediately. And in particular, do everything you can to encourage an open and sober debate. Don't let people who have views you might disagree with get marginalized or smeared. Recognize that one of the great strengths of democracy is the fact that we can argue about issues. I think the more that tends to happen in the United States, the more we're going to see American foreign policy on this and on many other issues revert to something that's more consistent with our broader national interests. Thank you.